is what we're making. A little silver bell. I'm going to show you how to make a silver bell. First thing you do is draw the profile full size. If you use lined paper like this, it's quite easy because this is perpendicular to the end. It's easy to lay it out. So I'm making mine 20 millimeters high by 12 millimeters wide at the top, which means that'll be 6 mil on either side of the center line, and 18 millimeters wide on the bottom, which is 9 on either side of the center line. And we just draw the shape, and what you have to do is extend these lines on up. So we want to go right on up until they touch. Now you could draw this out on paper, but I find it easier to just scribe it directly onto the metal. So I'm going to line my metal up with the edge of this, and I'm actually going to tape it so that it doesn't move. Just a little masking tape. Now what you're going to do is put a set of dividers on the point at the top of the bell, and you're going to just scribe the arc. Same thing, the bottom of the bell. Scribe the arc. Now we know that we can figure the circumference of a circle just by taking the diameter and multiplying by pi. In this case, it's roughly 65 millimeters. Measure every 10 mil along the arc, because if you just measure across the arc, you'll lose a few millimeters. Once you get, in my case, it's 65. Once you get to your final line, you scribe a line, draw a line from the tip of your cone to there, and that's the angle that you cut the metal on. So this is what you want to cut out. So you cut this out, anneal it, file these edges flat, and that will make a perfect cone. If you want to put a pattern on this, you need to put it on while it's flat. If you want just a plain silver bell, anneal it, form it around, solder it, and then round it up. Okay, saw out the pattern. Stay just to the outside of your mark so that you can file back to the mark. This is what your metal should look like. If you can hang on to it. Now, like I said, if you're going to put a pattern on it, anneal it, put it on now while it's flat. But if you're going to do that, make sure that you measure from the edge and scribe a line on it so that your two ends of the pattern will line up. This is quite easy to scribe a line on because you just set your dividers at whatever height you want. Yeah, and then just drag it down, and the line will be equal distance from on the ends, and it'll also be equidistant all the way through the cone. Now this layout for this works good for cones for the end of necklaces, thimbles, pretty much anything that you need to make a nice cone for. File the ends flat, anneal it, and form it. Just use your flat half-round pliers with the half-round bit on the inside to form this. And we just want to make sure that the ends touch perfectly. So whatever shape you need to get it in so that the ends touch perfectly. If it's slightly off, you can hold it on your bench peg, squeeze the sides together, and saw down through at a 45-degree angle. Don't hit the other side of the top. So now that should be a perfect join ready to solder. Hold the piece in your third hand. I've got the joint down, and I'm going to place a couple of pieces of hard solder on the join with my flux brush. Now, because this has a pattern on the outside, we want to keep the heat on the inside. So with the solder on the inside and the heat on the inside, it should be the smallest amount of solder on the outside to clean up. So we just gently heat this until the flux dries out. We make sure that the solder is in the right spot. If you need to move it, keep it warm, because the flux turns gluey if it's cold, so keep it warm. Brush the flame back and forth, side to side. Keep the flame on the inside. The solder will flow. And we'll have just a small amount of solder on the outside to clean up. Yep. So quench this, pickle it, round it up, and sand it. So there's the beginning of our bell. Tidy up your join. And you always want to tidy the join on the top of a curve. So whether you're making a ring or a cone or a bezel, anything, always wait until you've pickled it and rounded it up to tidy up the solder, because then it'll be the least amount of work. Once you've tidied the join, sand or file the top and the bottom until they're flat and the piece is perpendicular. So you can just put it on your bench plate. Have a look. If it's slightly off kilter, put a texture mark on that spot and file or sand until it's straight up and down. Same thing with the top. And once you get it so it's good both of those ways, you need to make a cap for the top. And the easiest way to do this is just to punch out a disc. If you don't have a disc cutter, you can saw out a disc about 1 millimeter bigger than the diameter, because we're going to put a slight dome in it, and when you dome something it gets smaller. When you have your disc for the top, put a punch mark in the middle, because that's going to be where you drill, and it's going to be difficult to put that mark in once you dome it. Now, when you're using a doming block and punch, always make sure that the block is slightly bigger than your punch. That's so you don't put ugly marks on the side of your punch. You want a fairly shallow dome for this one. So just a slight dome, and that's, for me, that's good. Now sand this edge back just by putting tape on your finger and rubbing the disc on a piece of sandpaper on your bench, because we want this nice and flat so that we get a good solder join on top of the bell.